Now we're going to shift gears a little bit and we're going to go now into the clouds. Doesn't that sound romantic? They're not the romantic clouds. They're the clouds that are going to help all of us define our businesses going forward. Such a key aspect, and it's a word that's on the lips of all business leaders these days, but we're going to give you some real practical insights on cloud transformation. And here to talk us through it is our own intrepid senior staff reporter, Carl Williams, who is just the person when it comes to technology and in the mining sector. Now, Carl is, as I said, he's our senior staff reporter at the Northern Miner, and he brings over 20 years of experience to the role. He's been helping in his previous life, helping organizations manage risks and opportunities around climate change. He's advised organizations operating across mining, energy, and utilities and manufacturing, property development, transportation, the whole swath. His work has also allowed him to develop excellent communication skills honed through presenting his at international conferences, chairing forums, and facilitating workshops. He's been published in Springer Nature, the Royal Institution of Australia, Popular Science, and many others. As a senior reporter for the Northern Miner, he combines his expertise and industry knowledge to write about the global mining and mineral exploration industry. He does a wonderful job at it. Carl, welcome to the Q2 edition. How are you feeling today?
Oh, top of the world, Anthony. And yourself?
I'm doing great. The sun is shining. Carl's in Toronto as well. Carl, is the hair pulled back in a ponytail today, or did you actually cut it all off? What's the situation there? We need to know.
It's ponytailed, I'm afraid still, Anthony.
I'm back Nothing to be afraid of, Carl. When you have that thick of a mane, you got to let it grow. The rest of us are
Indeed. Jealous. Yeah, most of the time I look like Cousin It from the Addams Family. So, which isn't going down particularly well with my girlfriend, but there you go.
Well, if she's still with you, Carl, then that means she loves you for who you are. And isn't that all we can ask for?
Absolutely. Love is deeper than a hairstyle, I guess. There's a lesson there. Anthony, thanks for that introduction. And welcome one and all. Another fascinating discussion on the cloud. And I'll try to make it as romantic as possible, but I think that may be a stretch too far in this case. We're really talking about data when we talk about the cloud, and data is becoming so important now that, when has it not been, but increasingly so as more and more data is collected. You could argue that data is, at least in the mining industry, a strategic asset these days. Cloud computing in itself really allows access to data on demand without having to maintain large infrastructure, IT infrastructure, will make big upfront payments. Everything can be done, or to a large extent, everything done remotely. It can certainly help mining companies secure their operations, improve efficiency, and then realize better return on investment. So who wouldn't want to achieve those goals? There are a number of cloud platforms out there already: Microsoft Azure, Amazon Web Services provider, IBM Cloud, Alibaba, Google Cloud Storage, amongst many others as well. They're all scalable, able to, and possibly, at the moment at least anyway, able to accommodate the expected avalanche of data the industry is going to generate over the next years. However, there's still considerable challenges that we need to address within the industry. For instance, currently there's still too few people employed in industries with the necessary digital skills. Connectivity can be unreliable, especially in remote or underground environments. And as approaches to cybersecurity, which is going to, again, only become increasingly more important, is often piecemeal. So for our discussion today, tackling technical debt with cloud-based technologies, we're inviting back two industry experts that we've chatted with before to explore how cloud technologies can address potential technical debt that's either already within companies or more so as more technology become available to them. First, I'd like to introduce Dean Gehring, Executive Vice President and Chief Technology Officer at Newmont, a role he's held since 2019. Dean joined Newmont as Regional Vice President in South America in 2017 and brings over 25 years of global mining operational experience to the company. Prior to joining Newmont, Dean spent 14 years with Rio Tinto in a variety of roles, including President and Chief Executive Officer of Rio Tinto Minerals, Global Head of Safety and Security, and General Manager of Resource Development for the Oyu Tolgoi mine in Mongolia. I don't know whether that's ever been pronounced with a Welsh accent, Dean, but
yeah, Carl, I should have told you. We always just called it OT.
If only I'd known. Dean has previously worked as manager for technical service at Freepont's Grasberg mine. That's much easier one for me to get my mouth around. And held various operational technical roles with BHP Phillips and Friday working for Freeport. He's also, in addition to this, 25 years of extensive experience. He's published papers in mining and project management journals, and has served on a university advisory board and is currently the co-chair of the SME Foundation Corporate Giving Committee. Dean, welcome back to the Northern Miner and our Global Mining Symposium today.
Thank you, Carl, and good afternoon or good morning, and I'm happy to be here.
Wonderful. In addition to Dean, we also have Anthony Downs, Head of Digital Transformation at Vale. Anthony is well known in the global mining industry for his broad technical and systems knowledge and track record of delivering innovative, robust, and secure solutions to tough business problems. Over the past 12 years, Anthony has worked for Hatch as principal consultant in the US. Prior to this, Anthony worked for Rio Tinto for 15 years, where he held numerous operational and corporate roles in various businesses across the US, Canada, and Australia. Dean, Anthony, and all the delegates on our chat today, a warm welcome to you all. And I think this is going to be another fascinating insight into how the industry is transforming digitally and how going forward, it's going to just become more and more part of business, current business operations from day to day. I thought I'd start off the discussion with a little bit of an insight into, we've got a report coming out very soon, the Northern Miner working with Amazon Web Services, Xeris, and Obscuro. We surveyed mining executives across the industry to get a sense of where they were with cloud technology. And what was quite insightful, I think it'd be a nice way to start, is 70% reported using cloud technology extensively, about a third occasionally, 27% use them frequently, and 60% reported never using them. So I think there's still a big gap. There's a long way to go in the understanding in the industry of cloud technologies and then actually implementing them. So first of all, the title is of a discussion, Tackling Technical Debt with Cloud-Based Technologies. Dean, if I can maybe come to you first, what do we mean by technical debt?
Well, what happens often, Carl, and I think it's probably the mining industry is a big offender of this, is when we spend money and invest money in cycles. When the commodity cycles are high, we'll tend to invest more. When they're not, they won't. And oftentimes what struggles is our computer infrastructure. And so, we need to be replacing our computer equipment, our infrastructure just as we would replace any other types of equipment we're operating in sites. Data centers is one of those things that if we're maintaining our own data centers, our own databases, the computers to store that data, and it starts to get old and out of cycle, we start to build up what we call a technical debt, meaning that we really need to replace that equipment. And if we don't replace it on a regular schedule, we start to experience outages. We start to fall behind on patches for software, which then causes us to fall behind on cybersecurity protections. And we just end up in this debt of, or what we call the technical debt of not being able to keep up with the technology and where we want to be as a company.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, Dean. I think that gives a clear idea that this is a big issue and is only going to get bigger for companies going forward as we mentioned, the technology become more available. Anthony, maybe I come to yourself for a moment. What would you say the key drivers for the industry are? And I'll come into the context of Vale at the moment. But what would you say the sort of overall key drivers for the industry to implement technology? I'm thinking really around the data side, if that's something you can maybe talk to.
Yeah, so our industry captures a phenomenal amount of data, day in and day out, and one of the key tricks is how do you unlock the value trapped in that data. So there's a whole range of things that you can do with that data around simulation, around optimization, around using that data to predict future states, whether it be a commodity price, whether it be asset health, there's a whole range of things. So what is typical in many mining companies is we have significantly more data being collected than we're actively using and getting value out of, and that's the focus, to try to unlock that trapped value.
Thank you. And I wonder, Anthony, maybe if you could just expand a little bit on, again, focusing on the data side, which is what this is really all about at the end of the day. But if you could just maybe give a sort of bit of a sort of insight, confidentiality notwithstanding, on where Vale is sort of, what is the benefit? It's all very well having this data, but what would you say is a sort of key area for yourselves at Vale where this has benefited yourselves?
So one of the key areas we're applying it to at the moment is around safety and risk reduction, and also around productivity. So in Canada, we have a significant portfolio of underground operations, and they're supported by a number of surface plants. What we've been doing recently is deploying Lte Underground, really lighting that up, really getting that connectivity underground. And what that's allowing us to do in real time is take a number of disparate data feeds into, let's call it an air traffic control tower for our mine, and then we're able to understand, how are we tracking versus plan, being able to get the trigger action response plans in place, and we're looking at high double digits increase in productivity and significant decreases in incidences by better situational awareness, better understanding in real time what's happening with our people, what's happening with our equipment, and what's happening with the ore body that we're working in.
Fantastic, thanks. Dean, come to yourself. I would ask you the same question. If you could talk a little bit maybe about Newmont's journey with cloud computing. Where did it start? What were the motivations? And again, maybe highlight some of the key areas you think where it's really benefited the business.
Yeah, for us, it starts off with a really basic point that we just wanted to get out of the data center business. We had too many data centers around the world that we were trying to maintain, and they were being maintained to various levels, and we just weren't seeing the reliability that we wanted. And so for us, that was really the first step, is that we knew we could do better. We also started to recognize that you're able to support a cloud-based infrastructure so much easier than you can site-based infrastructures, in particular in remote areas. So not only were we seeing the costs go down for maintaining that, but also just the resources that were required. Then the knock-on benefits become that it helped assist us in standardization. So we've talked about, I think, Carl, you mentioned on the onset of your comments that the scalability of this technology is really important. Well, having standardization and then the scalability that can follow on from that really gives a lot of flexibility. So as Anthony mentioned, we collect a tremendous amount of data in this industry. And as we see new data sources come online, we can so easily flex cloud storage capabilities to respond to that. And then finally, for us, it was cybersecurity enhancements. By having everything to a high level of standard, it supports better cybersecurity.
We'll come on to that question in a moment, actually, because that was quite a significant, as one wouldn't be surprised that data security is a huge issue. And the recent survey showed that as well, in terms of different approaches by the companies, how piecemeal, how disjointed they are. So we'll come on to that in a moment. But Dean, maybe sticking with yourself for a moment. Wow. It sounds like a panacea in many ways, cloud computing, to a lot of problems. Anthony referred to health and safety, being able to track people. There's ESG implications right across the board. It's difficult to find a part of the business where, in some way, cloud computing can't enhance the efficiency of those business processes. But what would you say are the main challenges that you faced in Newmont when you started down this road of bringing cloud computing in? I know many times as a consultant, I would talk to companies about technologies, and there's an incredulity factor you have to get beyond with companies. I wonder if you could maybe talk to that for a moment, some of the key major challenges you faced.
Yeah, Carl, most of our sites are very accustomed to operating autonomously. They need to have that ability to control their destiny. And so one of the challenges is just that fear of losing control. When you start to tell people your data storage isn't going to be on site, it's actually going to be in the cloud, and they don't really know where that is, and it's hard for people to necessarily understand. what does that mean, and what's their accountabilities, and how reliable is it going to be? And so it's helping people, through that, just through a very disciplined and focused change management process, bringing people along for the journey. The other challenge that comes in is the bandwidth to some of our more remote sites, and having that ability to make people comfortable that we're not only moving your data off site, but you'll still be able to get it. So that's another challenge that we had to help people with. And one of the things that we did along those lines is we standardized our global solution providers, making sure that the bandwidth pipes were very big, going to our sites as big as possible, to try to remove that risk and concern that the people at the sites had for losing their data. But what I can say is that once we got past that, it was a very quick transition when people started to recognize the step change and improvement that they were seeing because of taking that journey, taking those steps.
Thanks, Steve. Anthony, I put the same question to you. What would you, from your experience of Vale, with the introduction of or implementation of cloud and cloud-based technologies, what do you say the sort of really headline challenges you've faced and maybe still are facing in terms of getting that adoption within inside the company and the implementation of these solutions?
Well, I'd say we're pretty much spot on in alignment with Dean and his team, right? So it's the operational leadership not fully understanding what the cloud is, how it works, and being concerned about not being able to walk down the hall, open a door, and kind of point at this big box that has their data in it, right? And they're saying it's going to the cloud, etc. There's a level of unknowingness in there that you really need that change management. But just like Dean, once we got some use cases going, once we started doing it, the comfort level quickly grew. And today, a lot of the operational leaders, are comfortable with it and probably don't even necessarily want to enter into a discussion about where is their data, because they're comfortable, they know they can access it, and they know that it's got the right level of security around it.
Great. Thank you both for that. I think that's going to be a common experience for a lot of companies that have gone down this road, or when they do, I think they're going to encounter them pretty early in that process. One of the interesting outcomes from one of the many interesting outcomes of the survey I mentioned earlier on, which we will have a report on the Northern Miner website coming soon on that survey, is that 31% or sort of a third of the respondents said that budgetary constraints were the biggest problem with uptaking or implementing new solutions. I don't think that's probably the biggest surprise. Maybe what surprises me that figure wasn't higher. And also as well, concerns of data security came in sort of second place with about a fifth of responses. Anthony, sticking with yourself for the moment, you faced these challenges. What approaches, what strategy did you adopt as the head of digital transformation at Vale? How did you approach those who may be rather skeptical, or gain that knowledge gap in the black box element that is cloud? How did you overcome those that sort of reluctance to go down this road? Maybe we could just talk to some of the strategies to help others out there.
Yeah, so as Dean was referring to, traditionally in technology, it's been very much kind of a wave type investment, right? So you make a large investment, get everything up to date, and then it deteriorates over time to a point where you can't bear to let it deteriorate anymore, and then you kind of have that spike back up, and then you let it deteriorate again. And most of the time that's capital, right? And you're competing with capital for the new SAG mill, you're competing with capital for new tank lining, you're competing with capital, across the whole operating business. What cloud computing allows you to do is to turn that OpEx, that capital spend into an operating expense, right? So it's like paying your phone bill, it's like paying your electric bill. And what we've found is that as you get more advanced in the way that you're using cloud, it's very much like paying the phone bill, right? So it's not a fixed cost. If you're using more computing because you're doing some simulation models or some optimization models and you need more computing power for the month, you pay for it. If you're not running those models for the next 3 months, then you don't pay for it. It's a consumption-based model. And you need to work with your partners to kind of model that out, right? So there's sophisticated Excel spreadsheets, etc., where you kind of map out what you predict your usage will be, and it will clearly show you in a predictable way what your costs are going to be. And as Dean said, the key thing is the overhead to run cloud, right? The number of people that you need, the number of people you need to focus on keeping it running, can potentially be at a very different level than what your traditional IT structure might look like.
Dean, what strategies did you adopt to influence those budget holders within the organization there to get them to either at least consider cloud or to go down that road?
Well, for us, it was twofold. One, going back to the waves of spending that Anthony mentioned, if you can time that right, and you're saying we're at a point where we need to make a large capital investment and we're not going to do that, rather we're going to switch some of that to operating costs and buy a service versus buy the hardware, it actually shows up as a savings. So we were able to do that. We were at a point where we needed to make some investment, and we chose to take a different route. So that was actually something that the organization was very keen to do. So if you're not in that sort of timing, it can be more challenging. And then the other point, again, what Anthony mentioned is we developed use cases and we staged the implementation. It's not something that you have to do, that the entire organization has to adopt overnight. You can look at it on a site by site, or even take sub-components of a site. So it really allows itself to be staged in a way to help the organization be able to digest what it has the capacity to digest during that time.
Excellent. Thank you, Dean. Thank you, Andy. I think that gives some really good insights into those, for those companies out there who are now looking to either start that journey or some way down it in order to adopt those strategies to get buy-in from the powers to be. Coming back to the data security, which is always going to be an issue. I don't think that's ever going to go away. For as long as we've got people who want to hack systems, they're going to have systems that are going to be hackable. But there are strategies that companies can employ to protect their systems. Again, coming back to the information that we gleaned from those survey, a lot of the respondents there were actually saying that they're either not taking any actions to secure their systems, they didn't know what they were, and when they did, it was rather piecemeal. So maybe, Anthony, coming to yourself here, what I ask you, Vale, how do you approach the subject of data security? What have you done, or what are you doing to, as best you can, secure your systems as within the company?
So look, in the context of storing our data and leveraging our data in the cloud, we're confident the major cloud providers have a level of sophistication in both their security teams and their monitoring tools that would far exceed anything that we as a global mining company could bring to the table ourselves. That's not to say that we as users of that cloud service can't do silly things, right? Like weak passwords or no passwords, or misusing the tools, right? You can still get yourself in trouble if you do silly things. But the overall environment that our data is being stored in is significantly more secure, because these big cloud providers in reality can't afford for things to go wrong, right? Microsoft, AWS, those guys couldn't afford for significant issues, and therefore they invest in the right skills, the right tools to make sure that the data they're holding is going to be secured. But just to emphasize again, if you Google, AWS cyber, you'll find that there are events, but they're kind of drawn back to misusing the system rather than weaknesses in the system itself.
Sure. So to a large extent, then, Anthony, would it be fair to say that you're kind of outsourcing your data security needs to the cloud provider?
No, my cybersecurity team would kind of freak out if we were to say that. So look, we do have a highly skilled internal cybersecurity team that's overlooking everything that we do, including the cloud. But the security of the cloud and the data in the cloud isn't in their top 10, probably not even in their top 50 concerns. There are lots of other things that the internal cybersecurity team is focusing their attention on.
Sure. Thanks, Anthony. Dean, what if you could talk to that as well? Data security, what's Newmont doing themselves? What's their strategy?
Well, the way I look at this is that the protection offered by the cloud as it relates to cybersecurity is just an additional layer of protection. So it's not the end all and be all of protection, so much what Anthony mentioned. The other thing that I think is really important is if you think about, as Anthony mentioned, we can do silly things. And those silly things in many cases, in the worst case for us, leads to some sort of ransomware attack where your information is actually locked up. And this is becoming a very prolific type of attack. You can open up the newspapers and see it almost weekly that some major company or government's been struck this way. And what happens to those that don't know, it's actually the data is locked up. You can't use it. You can see it, but you can't access it. And then you get an email from somebody saying, if you want to access us, pay us this much in Bitcoin, we'll give you the security code and you can get it. If your data is backed up well, you're not worried by that. You're saying, I don't need it because I have it elsewhere. And that's something that I think the cloud storage helps with. We all, in the past, with our on-site data storage, we always put these cascading backup systems in place, and we thought we had it backed up. But you didn't have to press very hard to find out that they often weren't being used very well. Where in a cloud system, the backups are just so much better than I've ever seen any mining company actually do well. So if you do have an event, you actually have a way to recover from that event.
I think this is really interesting, Dean, because I think I'd like to stay with you for a moment because we've got an interesting questions come in. I was going to wait for the end for the Q&A with our delegates, but I think this is a good timing for this question. One of our participants today on the panel discussion has asked if you could talk about what the risk presented by large power outages on operations that are cloud dependent, and then by extrapolation, what the risk of that is to data security. Have you had this situation, or could you talk to in a more general terms about that question?
Yeah, so the way that we're using cloud storage, it's not to operate the plants. It's really pulling data that's being generated and using that in ways to help track and provide predictive analytics for what we can do differently. And that was something Anthony mentioned earlier. So there is an independent link between the data that's required to operate the plant that's localized at site versus how that data is then being pulled into the cloud to be used for other reasons.
Cool. Anthony, if you could maybe respond to that as well, please. If you could maybe talk to that.
Yeah, so to Dean's point, the cloud isn't the be all and end all, right? So it's not going to be the solution for everything. And like Dean and his team, we're not using cloud-based systems to control our surface plants, to control critical systems on site. Having said that, having the data stored in the cloud and not on a particular operating site means if there's an issue on that site, from power or any other issue, you can still get access to that data from other locations, right? So if we have an issue in one particular operations and there's no power to that data center anymore, and we were fortunate enough to move the data to the cloud, then we can still get access from another, from Toronto, from Brazil, from another one of our locations, and access the information we need that, may actually be very key in the recovery of that site back to full operation. So that having that data kind of sitting securely externally to the physical operating site, does have some distinct advantages.
Excellent, thank you. Anthony, maybe sticking with yourself for a moment as well. We've got another very interesting question come in. Do you see a time where companies will expect contractors or suppliers to the industry to have a certain cloud infrastructure and cybersecurity in place, and use that maybe as a leverage to be the preferred supplier?
So we take an interest in the cybersecurity of our key partners, right? Because it's a connected ecosystem, right? And you'll see some cybersecurity stories on the internet where very large retailers have been hacked by IoT in an aquarium, for example, right? So these people will find the weakest link that may not be you, but be a pathway to you. So yes, we want our key vendors to be as secure as we are. we don't have a preference on, you know, which cloud provider they use, or in fact today, if they use a cloud provider. But I don't think it's going to be potentially an issue. You know, the various clouds, those clouds are interconnected enough. You can handle it no matter you know, what provider they end up using. But to your key point, yes, we want to make sure that our partners aren't going to be a vulnerability for us via a weaker cybersecurity stance than what we have.
Thank you. Dean, I'd put the same question to yourself. Are you making moves to ask your vendors or even make them preferred vendors if they do have this cybersecurity infrastructure and are using clouds to provide in some way their services to you?
Yeah, it's similar to Anthony's comment. We do have an expectation of certain levels of cybersecurity that they have to be, you know, maintained. But also we have a segmentation approach to our network where we don't, you know, not all data is treated the same. Not all access is treated the same. So we will compartmentalize the access that certain vendors get. So they can't, if they do something silly, it doesn't have a cascading effect onto our network.
Excellent, thank you. And I think, if I'm right in saying that we've got time for maybe one more question here, and it's come back to, not surprisingly, the issue of cybersecurity. What happens when you are hacked? And I wouldn't ask either of you to go into any Greek detail if either of your respective companies have had that experience, but maybe speaking in a theoretical future where that may happen, what access do they get to the data?
So, well, I can kick that off. We were very fortunate to be able to hire a former Microsoft employee that worked in their cyber protection area for 20 years as our senior director of cyber. And so I've learned a lot about cybersecurity. I mean, that is not my background. I've had to learn a lot about it. I've learned a lot from him, and I've asked that same question, and that's why I have a little bit of understanding. If you are hacked, typically what happens is that if and they use a lot of military type terms. I mean, they'll deploy a payload in your system that'll sit dormant for maybe weeks, and then it'll start to spread out across your system silently, and then it'll go active. And people, what they typically notice is they can't access their data and they don't know what's happening. Then they call IT. IT looks and realizes, oh, there's an encryption on this that we can't open. And then you'll get a note from somebody, oftentimes in Eastern Europe, that will say, here's how, if you want your data back, here's how much Bitcoin you need to send us.
Interesting. Anthony?
Yeah.
Experience?
So just talking generally, and again, if people want to dive in, you know, there's some fairly easily Google searches will get you some insights. But look, I think there are a number of nation states and others who have an interest in understanding what mining companies are doing, what their finances are like, what their future plans are like, so that they can leverage that to their advantage. And you know, and there are a range of actors that, you know, have you know, either commercial gain or intellectual gain by you know, getting into other systems. We have a level of monitoring, we have a level of proactiveness where we're watching for unusual things that occur. We have a trigger action response plan to handle those as they occur. And you know, we've tried to design and engineer with security in mind, right? Just like you would when you're building a physical plant. So as Dean alluded to, you know, we have segmentation, for example. So it's not just an open door. If you come in through the window, you can get to the whole place. It's segmented up, and that's one of the many controls we have in place to kind of contain and manage any potential risks that we have.
Great. Anthony, many thanks for that. And I'll just to say, Dean, Anthony, many thanks again for an insightful view on your company's experience of the cloud. And also, I think that'd be very useful for our delegates out there. And again, I thank our delegates for tuning in today. And I hope you've taken some clear messages away from the benefits of the cloud, but also maybe some of the pitfalls and some of the challenges when actually implementing cloud-based solutions in your company. Anthony, Dean, many thanks indeed.
Thanks, Carl.
Thanks for having us.
Dean.